Please remember to leave a like, a comment, share the video about, and if you haven't already, subscribe. Thank you. Hello everyone, welcome back to a Megon 2 Electric Boogaloo. Today is a rare treat for me. It is a rare treat because rarely do I get sent topics to cover here. By rarely I mean I really don't. Typically I find them on somebody's Twitter. This though was sent to me by one of my lovely mods. Okay, tolerable mods. And it concerns children transitioning, pronouns, parents, school boards, and Canada. So no doubt this is going to be quite the eye-opener and or infuriating. It must be, because the mod in question screen recorded the comment sections as well, something we get to look at some point in this video. As we are all but blind as to what the nature of the topic is, let's blindly respond to it.
So it is literally one day after the Capitol Pride Parade in Ottawa, Ontario, and Stephen Lecce, the education minister, is talking to the press saying that parents must be fully involved in students' decisions to change pronouns.
A parent should 100% be involved in every aspect of their child's life. They have a legal right to, and they are bound by blood to. Until a child is either emancipated or old enough to no longer be a child and are therefore an adult and legally independent, they will do as their parent bloody well tells them. Children should be seen and not heard, and if their voices are somehow considered marginalised by other people, chances are you're prioritising the wrong part.
This, of course, comes after New Brunswick and Saskatchewan have both put forward policy, despite their school boards begging them not to forcibly out students to their parents.
You make it seem like some taboo thing. Oh, your child uses these pronouns. This was a super secret thing that only your child should have shared. Bitch, no. The parent must be involved in every step of their child's life for as long as they are a child. Once they're an adult, they can do whatever they want or identify however they like. Until then, they do as they're damn well told, and the school must always be in good communication with that of the parents. Transparency is key. If things become clandestine, the parent cannot be the very best parent they can be. Creating these little environments, only breeds further separation between that of the parent and the child. It is vitally important to keep that as close as possible.
Now, Ontario is not yet making this a policy. They're not putting forward any laws.
I'm not surprised, considering the Canadian Prime Minister is known for a number of things: embezzlement, blackface, and for being a ginormous cuck that wants to fuck Emmanuel Macron. All the while, give off the impression that he's a good little feminist, when if anything he's a good little Castro offspring.
But they're certainly laying the groundwork to do so. I think it's also really interesting to notice that the Liberals, NDP, and Ontario Green Party all marched in the Pride Parade yesterday. The Conservatives were absent.
Yeah, it turns out you don't need to virtue signal to make it seem like you give a damn about something. But at least in the context of the Conservative Party in this instance, they proved the point that they don't care, like all politicians. Those that are present also don't care, as is proven already by your rant at the beginning.
And while to some of you that might not be a surprise, they used to march. There used to be a contingent that called themselves LGBT Tory, which, dear God, the trans erasure of that one.
Couple things. First of all, it's called a play on words, not trans erasure. They're not erasing trans people by putting Tory there instead. No, it's just their way of being cute. Second, there are many people arguing whether or not T should even be there in the first place, since LGB is sexuality based and T is most certainly not. Or if it were to be that, you would be arguing that it's a fetish? Yeah, that wouldn't work so well if erasure's not good, nor is fetishizing.
But they used to march in the Pride Parade, and now they don't, and that is very intentional.
Do you think it's because there are rights now obtained that they no longer need to be seen marching in favour of? Or do you think it's because things have gotten so batshit insane that being seen next to that is very much in the ballpark of bad optics for them? Don't forget here, you've had a very liberal Prime Minister for a number of years now. You got rid of Conservatives after they were in charge for quite a while. They, for the sake of their own optics as your next election comes around, whenever that is, would want to be seen promoting what would better suit the voters who are now looking and going, no, I don't want this anymore, this is horrible. It's called playing the long game, but I'm sure there's an Illuminati point here you want to make.
And all of this is happening with this infectious idea that's taking over, of this idea of parents' rights, that parents have a right to know. They have a right to know if their child is going by a different name or using different pronouns in school.
Before you go off and inevitably say that that is wrong, I'm going to tell you that that is right. Not because I want to be different from you, but because they are children, their rights are tethered directly to their parent. That parent unconditionally loves them, supports them, cherishes them, nurtures them, raises them. They do everything they can to give that child everything that they did not have. That's the point of a parent. Obviously, there are some that don't. Don't distract, alright, people? You know what I'm talking about. Focus on what a parent is supposed to be. The parent, in schools, must be 100% involved in every aspect of that child's life. That education is vital. If you're teaching your children from a young age to keep these kind of secrets from parents, they live a double life. Why? Because they don't want to upset their parent. Why? Because they don't want to rub their parent up the wrong way and cause problems. Openness and transparency, understanding are vital. But go ahead and say that this is wrong, please. Just prove me right.
And the thing that keeps hitting me about this is that parents don't have rights, not parents' rights. Kids have rights.
Oh dear, I see what we've done here. You've proven me right, and then you've inserted a swerve. I'm starting to understand now why my mod, Hi, decided to screen record the comment sections to this particular video. We'll get to it soon, don't worry. I'm sure that'll be quite the read. How fecked is your system that parents don't have rights? Please answer that, you functioning moron. Please tell me how kids have rights in the context of all of this. The answer is, by the way, they bloody well don't. Again, the parent overrules the child. The parent is the superior officer. The child is always the subordinate. You often find that with parents and their adult children. The children show their parent the utmost respect, provided they have a good relationship. From the offset, of course, someone now wants to say, no, not me, I'm different. Okay.
Individuals have rights. We have seen in our legal and justice systems that the decisions that parents make can be legally overridden by their children. Children who are old enough to understand a concept are old enough to provide their own independent consent to that.
Which they should never be allowed to. Oddly enough, I have seen this used as legal argument for when a child under the age of 16 has sex with someone older. It's not has sex with, by the way. It really isn't. But I have to call it that because of YouTube. The reality is, no. The parent always overrules the child. Always. If you have a system that enables that kind of crap where a child's voice overrules that of a parent, you find that that system is fecked. You absolute receipt.
And if a kid knows what pronouns are, then frankly, they're able to consent to changing their own pronouns, and their parents do not need to be involved in that decision.
Actually, they kinda do. If a child chooses any random set of pronouns, the parent needs to know anyway what they're talking about, why they're going down this path, whether it is merely a form of expression of identity, whether it is an early start to gender dysphoria. These are vitally important to understand. Also, how they become exposed to this in the first place. That's key. If the education system introduces this to children, you are adding more confusion to a child as they go through the education system. This is fundamental. I don't understand how you don't get this.
But the number one thing that this really shows is that Doug Ford and the Ontario Conservatives are absolutely willing to get in there and start slinging mud at the 2S LGBTQA+ community if they think it'll win them an election.
2S LGBTQA+? What acronym is that? On this channel I've ripped into people who identify with all these different pronouns they choose and circles of trust for different pronoun levels, yeah? What the fuck is that? Stop making this into some kind of conspiracy theory. Turns out, you guys have been getting a one-way street for far too long, and now you're noticing people are starting to push back and you're acting like it's some kind of, well, a theory to remove you from existence. It's not that at all. No one's erasing your existence, no one's trying to deny your existence. They're trying to say, perhaps learn some decorum, restraint, and realise children should not be involved in any of this. By the way, conflating children with that of the 2S LGBTQA+ community. No, Children are not a marginalised voice that need to be heard within your group, and children should not be at Pride events either. Just to clarify, seen too much of that? No, never.
We are not immune from this in Ontario. And while me, as a queer person who gets protested and has these things happen to them, knows that, I hope that for the people who haven't experienced it directly, that this is a bit of a wake-up call.
I feel like I need to regurgitate some of the old phrases of arbiter of truth, tell me more, and citation needed. You say you've been protested, but it's anecdotal. Where's the actual proof? Show me something. This is not as much of a threat as you are trying to portray it, and I'm starting to understand why you got so much pushback. But we're not finished with your video yet. Once we're done, we'll get to your comments.
They are saying this to test the waters, to see what the reaction is. Does their base like it? Does their base not really respond? Do a lot of people get really mad at them and actually then start getting motivated to vote? Hopefully the last one. Transphobia is a cancer, and they need to cut it out.
In the context of your video, you're talking about children and conflating it with transphobia. That is quite clearly a false equivalence. You cannot include children in this discussion because of that word, children. Their voices are not marginalised because they are growing and developing. You are teaching them or trying to teach them to hide things from other people while simultaneously on social media broadcast everything about who you are. That is the nature of this ridiculous generation. It is embarrassing. So let's get to the comments, shall we? As you can see on the screen here, the video has been remarkably well received. The defense has been played, but the negligence and naivety of the person who made the video is quite clear and obvious, and the blowback is considerable. So they did eventually, because it's TikTok, respond to one comment. And that is where we're going to go next before we go to the comments of that one as well.
This is something that I want to speak to about just because there is a bit of a myth when it does come to age of consent in Ontario, specifically in a medical context or an identity context.
Well, as one who believes firmly in context being required for all things, I think it only right to give you the opportunity to try and perhaps reduce the amount of flack you get for the stupid crap that came out of your mouth in the first video.
My frame of this is always the medical context because that's what I do. I'm a psychotherapist, I'm a medical practitioner, and so I know that as a medical practitioner, I do not have a magic age at which someone is then able to provide consent to medical treatment.
Well, that's fascinating then, because when it involves children, the parent has the final say. They really do. Unless it is a medical emergency, your knowledge of the magic age, or lack thereof, is redundant. Because when it comes to children, and you were talking about pronouns predominantly in the video that got you all the heat, it's none of your fucking business really, is it? Because again, parent first. I do, however, understand now more and more why people asked you if you had kids. It's the whole appeal to authority fallacy thing.
Instead, what I have to evaluate is whether or not the individual in front of me understands and is capable of providing informed consent. Do they understand the risks, the potential benefits, what their other options are, and what's going to happen if they don't choose this course of action, and what could happen if they do choose it?
I can agree with this system existing for a fully grown adult, and I mean fully grown adult. I do not mean someone who is being conditioned to choose it or be made to choose it. The risk now is too high. You say with your expert opinion, you evaluate. Okay, you're evaluating children. That is not acceptable. I do not support it, so I'm going to criticize you for even considering it. Don't think of it as some progressive thing to save the children, because you're clearly not thinking of the children in the first place. You're taking play pretend to the extreme of irreparable harm.
That's all I need. And as a result, I might have a 13-year-old who can consent to psychotherapy treatment and a different 16-year-old who can't without their parents' involvement.
I'll be honest, in all instances, parents should be involved because child, from a completely legal stance, medical procedures that involve a child, the parent must be involved in. How is this complicated? Your expert opinion is not the final hurdle. No, the final hurdle is the parental consent, which means when it comes to things like the child's identity, every part of that the parent needs to know. So they can either understand, they can help, or they can perhaps be a parent and ensure their child doesn't fall too far down a rabbit hole that they cannot climb out of.
Just because kids develop at different ages and in different ways.
Which is why the age in this instant of consent for the context you have provided is redundant, and it should 100% be an adult making a decision on an adult's body, not a child's body. You are posting your content to social media, and social media is telling you, "You are wrong, you colossal smeghead." But you are acting so magnanimous because you believe your appeal to authority fallacy is enough to hide behind.
It's actually the same in family law. There's no magic age at which a child is able to decide which parent they live with after a divorce. You have to assess the individual understanding and capacity of that child and what their desires are, and therefore whether or not they are competent to make that decision.
Yet again with a false equivalence. Now I call it that because you can't make any real comparisons to what you are talking about. And in this one, there is no magic age for a child to choose which parents to live with, because invariably when it comes to the certain types of divorces that they typically are messy, the children go to the caregiver, which predominantly is the mother, which means it is not a decision that a child plays a part in, nor should they, because they are the child. Now I disagree with the whole caregiver thing, but society has yet to actually evolve past that point. And I could go on about that, but it's a distraction because it's a false equivalence.
Obviously, we do have a couple of hard and firm rules when it does come to a minimum age that someone has to be before they can do something. You've got to be 18 before you can sign yourself out of school and leave for an appointment. You've got to be 16 to drive, 18 to vote, 19 to buy alcohol. Got to be a minimum age in order to consent to sex, because that's a very important one to protect children from adult predators.
Why did you say that so weirdly? There's a fun thing here where you've mentioned all these ages of consent that seem to hover between 16 and 19 years of age. Quite important. What's the minimum age for this transitioning thing?
But when we're talking about a self-identity, remember, when we're talking about a chosen name or pronouns, that is not something that is getting, stamped on your government ID. That's not what we're dealing with. We're talking about what name you are chosen to be referred to in school.
You see what you've done there? Any pseudo-intellectual can do that kind of crap, where you try and deflect with distraction about other things or falsely equate ages of consent of one thing to then bring it back to self-identity. You're trying to play mental gymnastics, but you're doing it on the internet, which is full of a certain type of tism, where they see through that and go, bitch, that doesn't work for us, because we're able to logic it out. It made no sense. You absolute screwdriver.
And frankly, I changed that when I was a kid, without my parents' involvement.
Yeah, I'm sure your parents were really happy about that. Just as an additional point I should obviously make, your parents should have 100% been involved. Going round them behind their backs does not breed a healthy relationship with your parents, or because you wanted to change your name. I'll be honest, I was born Omegon. Do you think I like that name? No, it's not a good name. You get picked on because you stand out, which is a somewhat ironic name then, given the origin of Omegon.
My full name is Genevieve, but as a kid growing up, I went by Jenna. That's what my family called me, and as a result, that was the name that was on my paperwork at school. But I never really liked the nickname Jenna, and when I went to high school, I decided, actually, you know what? I don't want to be called Jenna by my teachers anymore.
You do realize the reason your nickname was Jenna is because the name you said is also pronounced Genevieve, right? You do realize that, rather than the pretentious French interpretation part that you did with your bastardization accent. Yes, Canadians don't actually speak French. Don't even get me started on Quebec, alright? You got triggered because your name is pronounced differently somewhere else and they ran with that as a nickname. So much so, you changed your name because nickname. Bitch, I've had at least 7 nicknames in my life and I didn't like any of them. But I allowed them to continue because it meant at least people knew who I was.
I want to be called Genevieve. And as a result, I said, hey, filling out that paperwork on my own at 14, I want to be called Genevieve. That's the name that I want to have appear on the paper. And that's all it took. That's all it did. They didn't have to ask my parents. Why would they?
I see we're doing another little peculiar equivalence using anecdotal evidence of you having a legal name, but it not being reflected in legal paperwork at a school. You do realize how that is not remotely comparable. A clerical error A clerical error is enough for you to go, right, this is my career now. I'm now going to compare this to people who identify as nouns, to people who identify as verbs, adjectives, because screw proper nouns. People who identify as fairy, vampire, dragon, kin, not Cthulhu kin, that is the one legitimate one, hi. Are we going to add Jedi gender in the future as well? You are such an absolute broken battery charger.
I was able to understand the benefits, the consequences, what it was going to be. Most kids can at the time that they start to want to do those things. There's no magic number. Kids can make their own choices.
You're an idiot. You cannot compare your lived experience because your lived experience is not the same in the slightest. Yours has some legal merit. Everything else you're talking about, no. Everything else requires the parent. Although to be fair, yours did too, really, for the school to acknowledge you by your actual name of Genevieve. Yes, I'm being that guy. Let's look at the comments, see how people received this one, shall we? As you can see, we're starting off with sycophants who understand and appreciate the information, but also seeming very familiar with the ages of consent. There is a big difference between a nickname and socially transitioning. You're being disingenuous and you're not a parent. You obviously don't have children. God obviously knows what he's doing. Leave kids alone. I'm honestly curious, do you think your personal perspective causes a bias in scenarios presented to you? Being an RP and the ethics I'm bound to, like adhering to evidence-based best practice, is definitely a lens I have to apply to my decision making. I'm calling doubt on that. My kid isn't even 2 and told us they wanted the full version of their name. Children are full people and can make their own choices. Hard to disagree, of course. Children should be seen, not heard. Effing weirdo. Thanks for supporting trans kid. I'm a parent and believe a child's autonomy, safety and agency. You're a bad parent if you are one. And you're a dangerous person in this world, like Nazi person if your opinion, and I feel like that one's a bit of a troll. Now obviously in all these comments that are continuing to go on the screen, yes, people are going to agree and many are going to disagree. Some do latch onto you don't have kids, therefore you don't really know what you're talking about. I think we're in a very dangerous position right now where many who, even if they have children or not, believe this is what's best for kids. I don't agree. I do not believe children should be experiencing social transitioning in the slightest. I really don't. And I don't believe the medical version either. I believe children should be allowed to be children and we need to stop pushing gender onto them. Just let them grow into adults first. If there is something obviously wrong, yes, doctors step in, but it has to be something quite different. What you, Cyril Cinder, push is a dangerous message. And also you use a false equivalence and your low IQ audience to try and get people to understand your perspective, one that is born entirely out of anecdotal evidence and a misunderstanding over your name and your dislike of a nickname, which is somewhat ironic since you're essentially trying to push it to be okay for names of choice, but your nickname not being your choice was the problem. Okay, I see what we're dealing with here and it's quite frustrating.